This video is going to provide an overview of Chapter 3. Here's an important feature to know. There are 15 chapters in the book, and every chapter is arranged into 10 days. The chapters, beginning with Chapter 3, all follow the same 10 routines. So this Chapter 3 overview will also help you to see how all of the other chapters are structured. When students learn the routine in one chapter, they know the routines in all the chapters. Let's take a close look at each of the days in Chapter 3. This is the beginning of day 21, and you can see that there are 2 pages on day 21. On the first of the pages, students work with multiplication ideas, and then on the second page, they work with 4 specific properties: multiplying by 0, multiplying by 1, multiplying by 10, and the commutative property of multiplication. On day 2, which is also 2 pages, students begin to work with the relationship between multiplication and division. And then on the bottom, students are working with representations and the relationships. Working with representations is very important because on the second page of day 2, students begin matching representations. I'll use color on my screen to show an example. A student may notice that 2 times 6 is equal to 12, that this relationship is connected to this relationship where you can see 2 groups of 6. And so these can be connected. Or this representation connects to this representation because they both feature 4 groups of 2. And this representation is connected to this representation because they both feature 2 groups of 7. And finally, there's this representation which does not have a match, and that's on purpose so that students can create their own match in the last box. So let me draw 3 groups of 4, and this would be a connecting representation. On the matching representations page, there is always one that doesn't connect to the rest so that students can create their own matching representation. Day 3 also features 2 pages, and it's called Part of the Chart. On the bottom, you can see that there's a partial chart that is very carefully and strategically selected. On the facing page, which is page 2 of this day, you can see that students are working with multiples of 3, multiples of 4, and then multiples of 1, 2, 5, and 10. And to check their work, they can simply look back at the facing page. And that's the end of day 3. Day 4 in each chapter is always a chart shading routine. Students shade the multiples of 1, they also shade the multiples of 10, and then they shade in these numbers and all of the numbers that are physically below them. On the bottom, in the triangles, students write those products, beginning with square numbers, and then on the next page, they complete writing all of the products, so that all 36 unique relationships are captured on this page. And that's the end of day 4 of this chapter. Day 5 of every chapter is a quick self-assessment. Students do this every chapter on day 5. They use 2 pieces of paper. It can be 2 pieces of construction paper or something very simple, and a student slides the bottom paper and names the answer, in this case 4. Then they slide to check, and if they're correct, they'll simply place a dot next to it. And then they'll move to the next one, think about the 2 factors, name the product, and if they're correct, they'll place a dot next to that. Now at this point, I'm going to speed up the video to show you what this looks like at the very end. When students are finished, they'll shade the triangles with the dots green, and then they'll use that information on the next page. Anything that's shaded green will be listed under Facts I Know. Anything that's not shaded green will be listed under Not Yet. That is the end of day 5, but keep in mind that students will be looking back at this page when they finish day 35, day 45, day 55, all the way up to day 145, so that they can gauge their own progress as they go. Day 6 is always very similar to day 1 in the chapter, so students will be familiar with this routine. You may have noticed that this is now working with another one of those 36 facts. Day 2 is the Take Your Time page, and these work with progressively more challenging questions. We're pretty early in the book here, so these are a little bit simpler, but students can use the answer key, and they can also use those papers. It's a really simple way to slide the paper down to check the answer with the answer key to make sure that the answers are correct. And that's the end of day 6. On day 7, which is breaking factors apart, there's a noticeable shift. First, there's only 1 page so that students can slow down and think deeply about these ideas. Also, this page is going to focus deeply on number sense and taking numbers apart in useful and important ways, and it's going to offer students choice in how they do that. There'll be more examples on the page-specific video, But in this case, you can see that the number 4 has been broken apart into 2 plus 2, 7 times 2 is 14, 7 times 2 is 14, and added together, the total is 28. Students will break apart one of the factors, they will complete the models, and then they will find the product. Because students have choice, a student might choose to break the 8 apart into 5 plus 3 instead of 4 plus 4, and then to work from that point. Every one of these is encouraging students to use their number sense to break numbers apart usefully in such a way that they can form partial products that will be useful in determining the full product. Here are just a few examples. Again, there's only one page on day 7 so that students can slow down, think deeply, and carefully consider multiplication. Day 8 is also a single page, and it is multiplication tile challenges, which is one of my favorite routines in this book. There is so much space for creativity and insightful thinking with multiplication tile challenges. In each box there's a unique shape and there's a clue, and students use the clue to find the value of the shape. To do that, they decompose the shape, and sometimes they will decompose it into squares that match the clue, write the value. So in this case, there are 5 groups of 4, and then they could find the total. 5 times 4 is equal to 20, and write that in the answer key. But students may do this in many different ways. For example, they may find something like this: 2 groups of 8 and 1 group of 4, which is also equal to 20. And there's so many interesting creative combinations and different ways in which students can approach this that it's really fascinating and interesting, and it really opens up the door for creativity in learning about multiplication. And of course, when students are finished, they can use the answer key to check their answers, but really what they're doing is they're validating their thinking and their ideas and their creativity in learning about multiplication. And that is the end of day 8. Day 9 in every chapter is always about multiplying by 9. So students will use a chart to write the multiples of 9, and then they'll break the multiples apart into tens and ones. And then they'll see the relationship to digit sums, which is very valuable later. There's so many different ways to think about nines that this presents only one. This really opens up space for students to think really creatively. A lot of times students have a favorite way of thinking about nines or approaching nines, and the second page on day 9 simply opens up a lot of white space. Everything on here has to do with multiplying by 9, but there's no direction on how to do that. So students can complete this page. Like all the other pages, there's an answer key that students can use to check their ideas and thinking, and there is a lot of room for creativity when multiplying by 9. And that is the end of day 9. And day 10 in every chapter is a self-assessment. I'm going to speed up the video so you can get a glimpse at what this might look like on a student's page using 2 pieces of paper. So here a student is using 2 pieces of paper to name products, self-check, and mark a dot next to any that are correct. When the process is complete, students can use their notes to transfer the facts onto the next page into one of 3 categories, and they'll be able to track this information over time to see their progress with multiplication facts. This is also important because it will help them to see which multiplication facts give them the best opportunity to really think deeply about multiplication ideas. And that brings us to the end of chapter 3. Then when students move into chapter 4, all of these routines will be familiar. The pages will look familiar, but the content will be different, of course. Also, because students are moving through the self-assessments every day 5 and day 10, they can look back and compare the notes from the prior assessment to gauge their progress. Working with multiplication facts early in the chapter will open the door for deeper thinking later in each chapter. Thank you for watching this chapter walkthrough of the Multiplication Advantage, and stay tuned for page-level videos.